Lies cannot stand the light of day, and so the greatest enemy of lies, the thing they fear the most, is truth. Truth has a real power to dispel falsehoods and deception, and so if you can shine the light of day upon them, then you can reveal them for what they really are. For the first time ever, documents hacked from Chinese police computers shed light on the secretive system of mass incarceration in Xinjiang. These documents provide unambiguous evidence of the fact that the Chinese Communist Party is currently committing genocide at a scale not seen since World War II. For the TLDR version, here's Dr. Adrian Zenz with the breakdown.
A first-hand account of police operations inside re-education camps, of images taken during police drills, security drills in these camps. The new evidence really shows that the re-education or the so-called vocational training in Xinjiang is nothing to do with poverty alleviation, nothing to do with helping people to get jobs. It's about brutal brainwashing. It's about putting them in prison camps guarded by heavily armed police. We have evidence, in the watchtowers that they use military-grade machine guns and sniper rifles in the watchtowers. And it's very clear that this is a campaign to break a people. And I was looking through these images on my laptop in the living room. I had to get up and go somewhere else and take a break. I was overwhelmed.
Name, Raheel Omer. Age when detained, 14. Internment status, re-education. Reason for internment. Raheel was flagged as a Type 12 person, a largely self-referential category denoting persons with danger clues because they are in some way connected to an existing police case. In Raheel's case, this is basically guilt by association. According to other documents included in the hacked files, she is the youngest daughter of a government official who was detained as part of Xinjiang's Strike Hard campaign. Name, Anian Hamid. Age when detained, 73. Internment status, preliminary sentenced. Reason for internment, unknown. Name, Tajigul Tahir. Age when detained, 55. Internment status, detained for re-education. Reason for internment? Documents describe her son as having, quote, strong religious leanings because he doesn't drink alcohol or smoke. As a result, he was jailed for 10 years on terrorism charges. Tajigul herself was arrested after being accused of illegal preaching. Name, Tursun Kadir. Age when detained, 54. Internment status, re-education and imprisonment for 13 years. Reason for internment? The file describing his case states that from August 2014 to April 2017, the suspect grew a beard under the influence of religious extremism. After detention, his beard was evidently shaved. The Xinjiang Police Files are a collection of tens of thousands of files that include a wide range of documents, several of them explicitly marked as confidential or internal. These include transcripts of internal speeches by high-ranking party officials, detailed internal operation directives for camp guards, and the personal information of thousands of detainees. These files were obtained by an anonymous third party who hacked into computer systems operated by the Public Security Bureau of the counties of Kana Sheher and Tekyas, both regions traditionally dominated by non-Han ethnic groups. After decrypting the files, the hacker gave them to Adrian Zenz, director in China Studies at the Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation, who subsequently started the process of authenticating their veracity. Investigative research teams from over a dozen global media outlets have since verified portions of the data, and on May 24th, the files were officially authenticated through peer-reviewed scholarly research. The details of how this was done can be found in the research article, The Xinjiang Police Files, Re-Education Camp Security and Political Paranoia in the Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region, which was published in the Journal of the European Association for China Studies. I believe these documents prove beyond a reasonable doubt that a genocide is in fact being carried out in Xinjiang. While that statement might sound hyperbolic to some, I think the file's contents speak for themselves. And so, with the preamble complete, let's take a look at those contents together.
When I was inside the concentration camp, first of all, raped, it happened. And then torture, with the electric stick, electricizer, and indoctrination with propaganda against Uyghur culture and against Uyghur identity and against human dignity.
Abdueli's story is emblematic of the situation that many interned Uyghurs find themselves in. He was arrested for trying to open a Uyghur kindergarten with the intent of preserving the Uyghur language and cultural identity. The desire to preserve his cultural and linguistic heritage is what made him a target for internment, and that's what the camp guards were trying to destroy. As evidence of that claim, allow me to draw your attention to a speech delivered in 2018 by Zhao Keshi, China's Minister of Public Security. In this speech, he singles out two groups as potential threats to internal stability. From a domestic perspective, Xinjiang has 2 million people who have been influenced by pro-Xinjiang independence and double pan-Turkist and pan-Islamist thinking. Southern Xinjiang has more than 2 million people who have been severely influenced by the infiltration of extremist religious thought. The first 2 million, those influenced by pro-Xinjiang independence, pan-Islamist, and pan-Turkist thinking, alludes to people who identify with a broader Turkic religious, cultural, and linguistic heritage. As Zenz notes in the following article, Beijing links this sense of non-Han Chinese identity, or pan-Turkic identity, with separatism, frequently describing it as a poison of the mind that must be eradicated through re-education. As I understand it, any group or individual that advocates for independence, or even just greater autonomy from the CCP, is guilty of separatism. That includes Uyghurs, Tibetans, Mongolians, Taiwanese, and more recently citizens of Hong Kong. In every case, the charge of separatism results in severe persecution. The second 2 million, those who have been influenced by extremist religious thought, could describe almost anyone who engages in religious behavior. In the files, we find individuals who have been arrested for things like growing a beard, abstaining from alcohol, reading the Quran, listening to religious lectures, using a VPN, turning off their phone, which means that they can't be tracked, and so on. Of note is the fact that in his speech, Zhao doesn't accuse these two groups of violent resistance. Instead, what singles them out as targets for re-education is their cultural and religious identity. And with criteria as loosely defined as that, it should come as no surprise to learn that internal spreadsheets from Kona Shuher indicate that approximately 12.3 to 12.7% of the country's ethnic adults were in some form of internment in re-education, detention, or prison facilities. This means that Kona Shuher's combined per capita internment/imprisonment rate was over 64 times higher than China's national imprisonment rate. The existence of re-education centers in Xinjiang is something we have known about for years. In fact, their use was signed into Chinese law as of 2018. Since then, the CCP has referred to the camps as vocational training centers. In the following interview, Shoharat Zakir, who was one of the top government officials in Xinjiang at the time, presents the image they've been trying to spread to the international audience. Currently, Xinjiang has established a training model with professional vocational training institutions as the platform, learning the country's common language, legal knowledge, vocational skills, along with the de-extermination education as the main content, with achieving employment as the key direction. The vocational training institutions have set up departments of teaching, management, medical care, logistics, and security, and allocated a corresponding number of faculty, class advisors, medical, catering, logistics, and security staff. The rationale for why these vocational training centers were established was allegedly to combat terrorism and extremism. This, despite the claim that, at the time when the interview was held, Xinjiang was reportedly generally stable, with the situation under control and improving. In the past 21 months, no violent terrorist attacks have occurred, and the number of criminal cases, including those endangering the public security, has dropped significantly. With that out of the way, let's examine how the CCP's propaganda contrasts with the information obtained in the Xinjiang Police Files. The files contain 3 speeches given by high-ranking party officials, including the one we previously examined. While all 3 of the speeches make numerous references to the fight against terrorism and the situation of Xinjiang's counter-terrorism struggle, an incarceration rate of over 12% suggests that something more is going on here. In a speech held in 2017, Cheng Quanguo, secretary of the Party Committee of the Autonomous Region, described the camps like so. We must ensure absolute security of our prisons and detention centers. The third place is training camps, and we must ensure their absolute security. The first thing is to ensure that no one can escape by making the camps very secure. The second thing is, we should make life better inside. Education, teaching materials, and lesson plans should all be well prepared, and care should be given to them, so that they can learn 2 languages, skills, and the law with a peace of mind. Right off the bat, we have a contrast that's worth noting. On the one hand, Chen talks about making life better. He references education, learning skills, languages, and peace of mind, all things that are consistent with the party's external propaganda. On the other hand, the number one priority is ensuring that no one can escape. Somehow, I don't feel like that's very conducive to an atmosphere that promotes peace of mind. Moving on from the speeches, we have a number of additional documents that reinforce the impression that participation in these camps might not be what you can call voluntary. These include images of internal camp police security drills at the Teques County Detention Center, PowerPoint presentations used in police training and work reports, and a set of security directives for how the camps are supposed to be run. Included in the security directives are several documents which describe security operations and incident response plans for the Kona Shahar New Vocational Skills Education and Training Center. These 2 documents in particular describe the standard operating procedures that are to be followed if someone attempts to escape. In both cases, the armed police officers are told they can fire warning shots. That step, in other words, is optional. Either way, if the so-called trainees fail to comply, the officers are instructed to shoot them dead. I guess this is what Chen Guangguo was referring to when he gave instructions to let the masses feel the warmth of the party and the government. Another security directive specifies that guards stationed in watchtowers surrounding the camp are to be armed with light machine guns and QBU-88 snipers. As part of their job description, these guards are expected to provide high-altitude fire support and direct suppressive fire towards the terrorists. A security plan dealing with the transfer of trainees gives the following instructions. Be on high alert. Take precautions. All transferring trainees must be handcuffed behind their backs and wear hoods and shackles in order to prevent trainees from escaping, harming themselves, or harming others. While the following footage predates the Xinjiang Police Files, I imagine the transfer in question might have looked a little something like this. Trainees indeed. As I alluded to previously, the fact that a genocide is being carried out against the Uyghurs is nothing new. Evidence has been available for years. Given that, what is the significance of the Xinjiang Police Files? Why are they important? The first reason is because, as far as I'm aware, this is the first time that we have evidence of how these camps are operated that comes directly from confidential internal police networks. It's the first time we've been able to corroborate witness testimony with official government documents. The situation reminds me of a quote attributed to Upton Sinclair. It is difficult to get a man to understand something when his salary depends upon his not understanding it. Well, now that we have evidence directly from the horse's mouth, the truth is that much harder to ignore for politicians and business leaders who have vested interests in maintaining economic ties with China. The second reason why these files are important is because they directly implicate the CCP's top leadership as the ones orchestrating the genocide. Evidence for that claim can once again be found in the 3 speeches. They all make references to having received instructions directly from Xi Jinping, such as the following quote from Zhao's speech. This investigation study visit to Xinjiang was approved by General Secretary Xi Jinping and Premier Li Keqiang, fully reflecting the great importance, concern, and support of the CPC Central Committee with Comrade Xi Jinping at its core for the work in Xinjiang. The purpose of the investigation study visit is to implement General Secretary Xi Jinping's strategy for governing Xinjiang, to further advance the fight against terrorism, to summarize and study the good experience and good practices of Xinjiang's counterterrorism and stability maintenance work, with a focus on doing some investigation study on the management of prisons. This brings us to the third reason why the files are important. Explaining this reason requires some context, so bear with me for a moment. The Xinjiang Police Files were coincidentally made public while Michelle Bachelet, the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, was on a visit to China. The purpose of her trip was reportedly not to conduct an investigation, but rather was aimed at promoting, protecting, and respecting human rights. During her stay, she was given a state tour of Xinjiang. As reported by France 24, Bachelet visited the Xinjiang cities of Urumqi and Kashgar, but no photos or further details of her itinerary were released during the trip. The envoy said she had visited a prison in Kashgar, where she saw prisoners and an internal court of appeals, describing her access as pretty open, pretty transparent. The Xinjiang government had assured her that a network of vocational training centers, which right groups say are forced re-education camps, have been dismantled, she said, adding that she had visited a former re-education center. Well then, if the Xinjiang government says so, then I'm sure it must be true. Pay no mind to the fact that Bachelet's visit was held in a closed loop, which refers to the Chinese model of isolating people inside a bubble in order to contain the spread of COVID-19. I'm sure the pre-planned places and people she was allowed to interact with were totally unscripted. Just like this photo of her meeting with China's foreign minister Wang Yi, during which he gave her a book titled Xi Jinping on Respecting and Protecting Human Rights. Yes, that's the same Xi Jinping who we now know is directly responsible for the genocide in Xinjiang. Returning to the article, we're told that in her strongest comments aimed at Beijing, Bachelet urged China to avoid arbitrary and indiscriminate measures in its crackdown in Xinjiang, but also said she recognized the damage caused by violent acts of extremism. Notice that she said acts of extremism, not terrorism. Given how extremism is defined by the CCP, we're left with two possibilities. Either Bachelet is really bad at her job, or she's being disingenuous. Personally, I'm inclined to believe that she's being disingenuous. The reason why is because, as reported by Human Rights Watch, UN High Commissioner for Human Rights Michelle Bachelet first indicated her intent to report on Chinese government abuses across Xinjiang, the Uyghur region, in 2018. Since that time, she has offered procedural updates on the status of negotiations to gain meaningful access to the region. In September 2021, Bachelet confirmed that her office was finalizing its assessment of the available information on allegations of serious human rights violations in Xinjiang, with a view to making it public. In December, a spokesperson for the Office of the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights said the report would be released in a matter of weeks. As of the making of this video, that report still has not seen the light of day. Why not? That question brings us to the third reason why I consider the files important. Regardless of whether it's because of corruption or incompetence, the UN's Human Rights Council, of which China is a member, has effectively become an extension of China's propaganda department. Humanitarian concerns aside, the fact that the CCP can exert influence over international bodies like the UN is extremely disturbing. As Christopher Walker, vice president at the National Endowment for Democracy, recently pointed out, the dynamics surrounding the UN Human Rights Commissioner's visit are part of the larger pattern in which Beijing, through manipulation and intimidation, seeks to shape behaviors and norms in line with authoritarian preferences. And on that somber note, we've reached the end of today's video. If you found this presentation informative, then why not leave a like down below to show your appreciation. Either way, thanks for watching, and until next time, get after it and stay free.